Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, my brothers and sisters, I think all of us are very much aware now of the need to prepare for a large number of deceased from Covid-19 in the Muslim community. And this is an initiative using the NBC guidelines, the National Burial Council, which basically is an oversight body for the different masajid in this country, in the UK, but this advice will be as generic as possible so that other countries can also then try to apply it as best as possible. What we're trying to explain here is what the minimal requirements would be with respect to preparing the deceased in terms of the washing, the shrouding, and then the burial, and then the janazah itself. This is of course a very emotional moment. Many people will not be able to be present at any stage, let alone the picking up or the last moments of that your beloved's life, let alone then the washing or the shrouding itself, and even of course physical distancing rules will reduce your numbers at the actual graveyard as well. So this video will be trying to encompass as much as possible of that. It is aimed specifically at two groups of people. Number one, the volunteers, and this is the beginning of that appeal. This is a request on behalf of all of your local masajid and funeral centers for people to get involved at different processes, especially the sisters, because we are down in general with the amount of sisters that can be that are available to do the ghusl for the female deceased victims. So our brothers and sisters who are fit and healthy, no comorbidity risks, that means no underlying illnesses such as heart disease or diabetes or whatever. They should be adults, so it should be above the age of 18, and they need to be under the age of 60, because just generally we want to reduce the risk. Now, is there a risk? There is. This is not me saying that this is completely absolutely possible for every single person to follow this process. The Royal College of Pathologists in the UK, the Public Health England in the UK, the CDC in America, the EDC in Europe, a number of the professional bodies that are involved in post-mortem and pathology have declared that the risk of transmission of infection of COVID-19 is low. It is low. It is not zero. There is a risk. That risk is primarily, as you're going to see when I demonstrate on the body itself, that risk is primarily coming from the bodily fluids that may come out during the ghusl and any exhalation of any fomites, or rather any form that the virus may spread from the mouth or from the nasal mucosa. And for that reason, we want to make it clear that this is not without risk, which is why, of course, the guidelines from NHS PHE have excluded any vulnerable people, those who have these conditions or who are of elderly age. And of course, in our community, the majority of the people who fulfill this process are of the elderly, are 60, 65, the most experienced uncles and aunties or masajid workers. And so they are out of the game immediately. So we need a load of volunteers to come forward, and you'll see details of that spreading over the next few days in preparation for the next few weeks. We're expecting this to become a very serious problem. There's been some discussion about what is the minimum level of PPE that's required. It's important for us to emphasize the difference between what the government and what the local health authorities and the international health bodies are requiring for the preparation of the deceased versus what we would need for frontline health workers, those who are dealing with the living, those who are currently diseased, which is a huge risk, of course. And we know the scandal around the world because of the lack of PPE. But PPE is a very wide-ranging phrase. Personal protective equipment can range from the basic minimum, as you're going to see what we're going to use, versus that which we require for someone who is involved in what is known as an AGP, an aerosol generating procedure, which is in cutting into the body or intubating or to get physically involved in the bodily fluids of someone who is diseased. And so surgeons and nurses in front line, paramedics when they're picking up someone who is coughing, spluttering, and in the process of worsening conditions. So those folks require full, complete PPE. This video is not about that. This is not about trying to train those folks. They know exactly what they need to do. The donning and doffing process for PPE, the fit testing for PPE, is really for those folks who are frontline. For us, according to the guidelines at the moment that have been released, and this is what this video was delayed to ensure that we can try to maximize safety. As I said, there's always going to be a risk. That's a full legal disclaimer. Those folks who are ready to take this job on, they're doing a great risk, they're doing a great service, of course. However, it is not as dangerous as people may think that it is. So before I actually don the PPE in an official way, I want to just give a demonstration of, to make it clear what kind of availability there is. Again, this is not for front line. This is not for front line. This is just for the process of washing the body and handling the body of the deceased. You have everything from the bare minimum, which is simple plastic aprons. And I want you to appreciate that when it comes to plastic aprons, their job is really only because of splashback. That's the only risk in the washing process of the deceased. And this is what I will be actually using, which is the minimum guidelines. And of course, those who are more experienced in the washing process can feel more comfortable wearing that. But if you wish and you want to, and this doesn't cover your arm, this doesn't. So for example, you have these two. This is a proper surgical gown, which is what would be great if you have access to. And this is the normal kind of bodysuit that is sometimes used. So for example, they have buttons at the front, which you would put on. And it's full sleeve, and so therefore it covers your sleeves itself. But because it seals at the front in an imperfect way, it's just buttons in this manner. This is not giving you full protection, even if you were to complete all of the buttons. Okay, so you still have gaps, which means that you would then put an apron then on top of this to seal that part up. So you would then cover up like this if you are using something like this, which is opening at the front. If you are able to get a surgical gown, which is even better, then it would be the very first thing that you would put on. In the process of donning or putting on your PPE, after you have washed your hands, and again, I'm going to do that properly on site, this is what you would put on. You would ensure that you put the sleeves in first, and then go around to the back, and then make sure that you have a double tie at the bottom and then at the top as well. So once you have something like this, then you do not need now an apron if you're using something like this. This is a disposable one, so any splashes that will come onto this, it will then be discarded. So this is with respect to the bodysuit. Now with respect to the gloves, the gloves are standard. The next thing that would go on would be your mask, and this is what's called a very simple surgical mask. All right, this is not what's known as an FFP3 or a mask with a respirator or an N95, as some folks call them. Those are what are required for frontline work. This is not what's needed for PHE, for according to PHE guidelines. When it comes to the washing of the deceased, this will be sufficient. This is sufficient. This is just a very simple mask that you will ensure has as good a seal at the top of the nose by just pressing down gently at the metal strip to give as much cover as possible. This is not airtight. You can feel the air escaping at every level. This is not going to be any use of any kind of, and this is of course why there's an outrage. Our doctors are having to work with these things, which is unacceptable, where there's a real risk of infection. The risk of infection from a deceased body is minimal. The tissue is the holding of the virus in dead tissue is not the same as in living tissue. They've not said there is no risk, but the risk is minimal, which is why they've said upon all guidelines, which you'll see attached, of course, to these documents and these videos, this is going to be sufficient for the washing. And what is its function? The function of this is only to ensure that splashbacks that might have infected viral material, is then going on the outside. The blue is the outside, and just to protect. And likewise, when it comes to eye protection as well, when you put on the goggles and visor, that is being done only again to just protect your eyes. If you are able to have goggles which are suction based, or a visor, then that's brilliant. But if you don't, it is sufficient for you just to be able to put on something like this, again, only to cover the risk from splashing when you are actually involved with the body itself. Okay, literally that would go on, and as when we do the donning and doffing properly, then you will see that go on. The last things that you will put on will be the gloves, which will be just normal nitrile, non-sterile gloves, which you will put on, and that will be the last final thing. If you are using a bodysuit, then this will then go over the sleeve of the bodysuit as well. So this is the process for actual putting on the different variety of PPE that's sufficient for this particular process. For me, you will see that I will be using just this. And most people who are experienced at washing will be using just this as a minimum, if they are able to, and I will be doing my sleeves like this. And that's because I will want to be using my hands only, and I will be ensuring that after the process I'll be washing my arms afterwards. But as someone like myself who is an experienced washer of deceased bodies, those who want to be more careful and you take extra precautions like using a full sleeve gown on top of your clothes, then that's of course even better. But you shouldn't be so petrified of the body and have such a fear. You shouldn't really be involved in this process if you're that worried, because there is a small risk, but that risk is definitely mitigated by the amount of material that you will see us put on in the next section. Okay, so now when it comes to what's known as the donning process, what you would use for frontline healthcare is different to what it is now. With the dead body, you do not need the same level of preparation. So, for example, you would be using an alcohol rubber every single moment, from between putting the apron on, putting the glasses on, etc., etc. Every single moment you would be cleaning your hands, washing your hands. In this process, that's not something which is required. Afterwards, when you're doffing, taking everything off, absolutely, because that's risk of infection from the body itself. But in this stage, simply washing your hands and being ready is fine. The first thing that would happen is, the first thing you put on is your body protection. That would be your gown, your surgical gown, if you put that on full sleeve, or as in my case, which is going to be sufficient. And as I said, an apron is only what is required when you are manipulating the body itself. Then that's sufficient. So you would tie it at the from the back, and if it has a tie at the middle and then the top part, then you would do the same. In my case, because I'm not using a full sleeve, then I will then roll up my sleeves and make sure that it's secure. You do not want that to be falling down during the actual process itself. Here, I will be ensuring afterwards that I will scrub my arms in a very rigorous way with the soap, just like you do with the hands. And I want you to remember, every time that we are being asked by health authorities to wash hands, it's because we believe viral matter is being transferred upon the hands. This idea that I can't let the virus touch me or my body is nonsensical. That's the whole reason why you're being told to wash your hands, because it is everywhere. And as long as you wash your hands thoroughly, properly all the time, that is how you protect yourself. Again, I emphasize that there is no way that you can avoid risk entirely. After you've applied your apron or your body cover, then you will apply the mask. The mask should go on before you put on the eye cover, because it will be an easier fit. As I said, this is a very simple surgical mask that covers your mouth as much as possible. Again, a beard, for those folks who have a beard, is going to be then exposed, which will mean that as afterwards you will be washing these surfaces. You are wearing this because of splashes. If it touches onto here, you're not going to get infected immediately from any splashback that goes onto a beard. Whereas if it went straight into your mouth or into your nose and it's then inhaled, of course that's going to lead to infection. That's the reason we're covering the nose and covering the mouth and then covering the eyes. Here you'll need to wash afterwards when you get home. And that's something, of course, as many of the scholars consider to be a recommendation to wash. And then you will put on your eye cover, and now you are ready to actually perform the ghusl itself. The next stage is then receiving the body and then putting it onto the table for washing. Okay, so for those folks, just to add, those who are concerned about their beards, now the beard being exposed at the bottom part, as you saw in the previous image, is as is slightly greater a risk as the exposed arm. You'll need to wash this, but obviously this being closer to the mouth, you might want to cover it. It's not obligatory if you want, but again, just from a safety point of view. So you'd either use a beard protector, which is the same that goes over the head. And remember again that you should wash all of your clothes at the end of the day, just to be on the safe side. If you have a beard protector, it's great. If not, then you can just use another surgical mask. You'd put it over the ears. You'd fold your beard into it as best as possible. And then you would then apply the second one over. Just look in the mirror and tuck in as much as you possibly can, just to reduce the exposure of the beard. This is again just an added precaution for those people who want to ensure that their face and their surface areas of whether their beard or whatever is minimal exposed to any splashback. When it comes to the deceased, someone who's suffering from COVID-19, almost always it will come in a body bag. And the body bag will be almost exactly like this, except that it will be waterproof. Now, they're quite solid and it will make it a lot easier for us to transfer the body across. You will need generally 4 people. And I want you to know that this is not a demonstration of the full sunnah ghusl. There's plenty of videos that have been recorded about that and fiqh of death and this. And no, this is just for the bare minimals for a COVID patient. Now, when the body is in a body bag, it's a lot easier to then transfer across. In the absence of that, then you'll need to have all 4 people lifting. One to be holding the head as still as possible, and then at every part of the body across 4 people. Now, when you have the metal trolley itself, you have to make sure that if you are just getting used to these equipment for the first time, there will be a tilt on it, or unless it is aerated at every single stage so that the dirty water can go through. If not, then it does need to have a slight tilt so that it can then come and drain out at the bottom. So, of course, in this, I want you to assume that I am wearing my glasses, and I want you to assume that I am wearing my mask, but so that I can speak for the purpose of the video. I will not be wearing anything, okay? I will not be wearing anything, although you must assume that I am. And likewise, all the rest of the volunteers, they're not wearing anything, but you must assume that they are all wearing aprons and the full gear. So let's move this body across. So in this scenario, I would be holding the head here. Atif, if you grab the body here, and we'll lift it 1 time, 1, 2, 3. And that is how the body would be moved across in the first stage. When the body has been transferred over to the metal trolley for washing, of course, this needs to make sure that you've disinfected it with the appropriate cleaning materials. And then the opening of the bag. And the body bag, I want you to remember, not every local health authority is giving the bodies in body bags. According to the latest guidance, NHS and PHE guidance, you don't actually need a body bag after death for the transport of the body. Obviously, it makes it a lot easier, especially with respect to movement and maintaining cleanliness. So if you receive it in a body bag, then so be it. Now, at the moment, the death rate is controlled. The refrigeration space is available, and that means keeping the body cool, and that reduces any risk of evaporation of any gases or any respiratory products that are coming up from the body of the deceased. If there was a situation where there was no cold storage and there were bodies that had been left at room temperature for any appreciable period of time, then theoretically it's possible that in a sealed body bag, which has got no air going into it, that there could be some gases. So it would be with your mask on, it would make sense just to open that up slightly, just a little, to ensure that you're not near it, and if there is anything that needs to come out, then it comes out. So once we have just opened that bag up a little bit, the first thing that we're going to do is just to expose the head. The first thing that you're going to do is to get some cotton and to seal up the nostrils. Gently, of course. The Prophet ﷺ commanded us to be very, very careful with the deceased. And then the mouth. In this case, there is some sellotape on there because this is used to do demonstration. Of course, you don't want to, but just imagine that has now gone in the mouth, and then you will get a mask. And the mask itself will then be applied to the body itself. What I want you to know is that you will do the ghusl with the deceased having the orifices closed and this now attached, and it will be tied to the actual ears. I'm going to have to remove this for this process because the dummy itself does not have that does not have the earlobes to hold onto it. Then the body is carefully opened because you do not know whether it's in a state of undress or not. And so you will carefully open it up, and also because there may be some fluids to the side and left, and so you need to be careful with that too. So you will carefully open it. Most of the time the body will be fully clothed, or it will be in a hospital gown, and so it will be safe to open it up entirely. If you're not sure, you'll just open it up and keeping it together like this, and then you will just make sure that the aura is covered. If there is if the body is naked or it's only a very flimsy hospital gown, then keeping the part together, you will then get a thick towel or a biggish towel or a big sheet, and this sheet will remain on the body throughout the washing process. You will cover this in this manner. You will then open up the body bag and then transfer the sheet to the body itself. Being careful with the body bag itself, because that is seen as contaminated waste. Of course, you need to have your dustbin to hand, which will be for contaminated waste. Once the body is covered, this is going to remain here for the entire process, which is why normally it's a thick, heavy towel, so that it doesn't come off during the washing process. Once you have now got the body bag off, you will either, if it's nice and simple, you will just slip it off. If not, then you will cut it off. You need to have your scissors there, and then you would then go through and you would cut the clothes of the deceased into its pieces, and this would have 2 people, 3 people, 1 on each side, ensuring that happens, and then together, then you will then gently. So I would then lift the head. So for example, Ashraf, if you just come. And so I would then lift the head, remember it will be covered, and then this will be slid out underneath. And that's what would happen all the way. So you will take this off gently, and once that has been taken off, you will gather it all together, and you need to make sure that your contaminated waste bin is close by, that its lid is already open. Just like, for example, this one here, you will just have it close. You will make sure that it doesn't have the lid on, it's been open, normally has a key. Just pick up and just drop in, and that's it. And that will also be the case for every other thing. Just drop, drop, drop. You don't be flapping around with this too much, and you keep it at a distance that it doesn't get too much in the way. So the next stage is to now do the obligatory aspects of the ghusl itself. Now, as I said, this is not a video showing the sunnah aspects. If this was a normal non-COVID patient, then we would not only do the istinja and properly as well, we would ensure that we have something physical on our hands to clean the orifices properly. We would be pumping the body itself very gently to ensure that we expel any fecal matter. We would then be very, very hands-on. After we done the wudu, then we would then ensure that we would then rub the body. This is not going to happen in this particular case because it's a COVID patient. We're going to be minimizing the amount of contact that we have with the body, but at the same time, we're not touching the body. You've already done that when you have transferred the body itself physically. That's the reason why you're wearing gloves. That's why you're going to wash yourself afterwards. We're going to not avoid not touching the body in its entirety. 2 people will then do this process. In principle, you will have your buckets, couple of buckets ready. The water should be nice and warm, treating the body with respect, and you will be doing this in a way that you're minimizing any kind of splashing. Now, ideally, if you do not have a bucket, then you will have a hose that has a cut-off end, not a shower head. We cannot have forceful shower coming out. Water's going to go everywhere, splashing everywhere. But if you have a gentle hose that will literally just come straight out like from a tap, but in a very, very gentle, close manner, then that's something else that you can use. In the absence of that, and using something like this, there's very, very little you can do. And I want you to understand that what we're trying to balance is between those people who are insisting that we're not touching the body, it's infected, it's this, which is not what the official guidance says and not what our religion allows to treat the Muslims when that risk is low, versus being irresponsible and increasing the risk for absolutely no reason. So that balance is difficult. And I'm going to be very honest, with a bucket, with a lota like this, it's very difficult to ensure full cleaning of the private parts. However, you will then ensure that the water is focused in that area. And if you have the hose, then you will be able to, and I have to go from the top because of this, but if I have a hose, then I will be able to then hold it from the bottom and underneath and ensure that the private parts are clean in the istinja process. Again, you would not touch the fecal matter. If there's any part of the body that's the most riskiest, then it is the bodily fluids that are coming out from there. You will ensure that plenty of water is used and that this area then is definitely cleaned out as much as possible to ensure that the water is flowing and any fecal matter is removed. The next stage then is to do the wudu for the body itself. Now, it is possible for two people to do that. Again, if the bodies are stacking up and if the situation is difficult, then with one bucket on each side, the parts of the body will be done. So if I am now doing it myself, again, depending upon how much, like myself, when I'm doing this, I am going to wash the hands. I am physically going to use soap. That's myself. For those folks who are worried, then you do not need to touch. So just based upon someone who is worried and concerned. Again, a legal disclaimer that we are saying that itself there is a risk, a small risk of infection from the body which is not able to be quantified, but not enough of a risk to not wash the body. If you are concerned, then you can just pour the water on the hands itself. You start on the right hand side. The Prophet ﷺ, when he instructed the Sahabiyah to wash Zainab, his daughter, radiallahu anha, he said, make ablution for her and start on the right hand side. So we would then ensure that the right hand is washed first, and then the left hand after that. Then it would be the face, and the face itself, because we have covered it and we were able to now actually tie the face mask around, it will be the same as we would do in wudu. So it would be the mouth, and it would just be gentle, just pouring over it, pouring just gentle amounts over the nostrils itself, and then over the face, using a right hand and gently just washing the face, gently washing the face itself. Remember, the nose are covered so water does not get in, and also to prevent infection coming out. Once that is done, then you will wash then the arms just like you would do in the normal process. And again, from those who don't want to actually touch the body, you can just pour the water from the right arm from the elbow down to the bottom, and then likewise then on the left arm. Then you will then wipe over the head. You will wet your hands and wipe over the head of the deceased very gently. And then you will wash the feet. And again, when we're doing this with two people, then one person is doing the other foot and the other one is doing the other foot. And you might say that this is not the continuity of wudu, but in this case, when there's two people doing it, then that continuity is something which is left. So two people would then do that. And that is the process of the actual wudu itself. The next stage then is the ghusl. Now again, the point of this washing is to cleanse the body. But when we say the cleansing of the body, the focus is the ritual cleansing of the body, meaning it's a spiritual cleansing. If we really wanted to clean the body so that it itself is the most safest thing, then we would just spray it with bleach. That would be the obvious thing if the focus was on just having an absolutely clean body. It's a combination of both. It's some level of cleanliness, which is why the Prophet ﷺ would apply camphor, kafur, and use sidr, which is soap, and would use perfume as well. And a combination of the spiritual, which is why we're doing it in order, why we're doing the wudu first, why we started with istinja, why we started on the right hand side. So the spiritual aspect is very important as the haqq of the deceased. Now in our case here, we are talking about a minimum. A minimum would now be that you would take the water and you would wash on the right hand side of the body. The right hand side of the body would mean you'd start in this area here. You would pour, wash, and as I said, another person will be here. So if I'll just give an example, Ashraf, if you come and show, if you lift the body would be lifted just gently, and it would be just poured, underneath, being poured, underneath like this, very little movement, until the whole part is then poured like this. Put the body down gently, and then we would then do the same. Head, and then the left hand side. Pouring, underneath, pouring, and then ensuring everything is now going further down. All the water being taken down to the dirty part, and that is what would continue. Again, this body is obviously has no flexibility. Now, this is quite hands-on. People would say that I don't want to get involved that much. If you don't want to, then that's something which is your own decision, and you're not sinful for that in any single way. That is This is not the bare minimum. If you're talking about a absolute bare minimum, you could theoretically take all the water and just allow it to flow. Again, a gentle hose is the easiest. If you have a gentle hose and you hold it from this side and allow the water just to keep flowing all the way down and ensure that every stage you just lift the body to ensure all parts of it are wet, then the basic obligation is fulfilled. This is down to the amount of risk that you want to expose yourself to. Myself personally, I will now go further. I will now have my second bucket that will have soapy water in there. And even though I will not be rubbing, but I will use that soapy water and I will almost definitely pour it in the areas of the private parts, in the areas where we normally would clean, in the armpits and so on and so forth. I will do that with my PPE on that I have, and especially if I have extra PPE on as well. After we have then applied the water, if you do that 3 times, then that's brilliant. If you just do it 1 time because you want to then stay back and you don't want to touch the body, that's fine as well. But be careful. The further you're back, ironically, you could actually increase the risk of splashes. So you want to have that balance, that you don't let fear completely dominate you, but you make sure that the bare minimum is done, which is just the washing itself. After this has occurred, then you're sure now that the entire part of the body has been washed. And you are able to apply something, but that's not absolutely required. So the kafur itself is acting as an insect repellent. It's actually acting to disinfect the body as well, to allow it to be preserved longer from insects and the like. Once you're finished, then it's about time to dry the body. The drying of the body itself, you would use this cloth to just come up, and you'll get the towel, the towels that you will have, and you will just ensure that this is now being soaked up, the excess water, and then you will gently, because as we said, the guidelines are in a COVID patient, minimal movement. Even though you've got your mask on, don't forget, I've got my glasses on, don't forget, and this is now covered, this has been covered. So genuinely the risk is minimal, which is why they've released that guidance, because they recognize that we have to ensure our rights. And it's not becoming of Muslims who may think that because they are professional or doctors or something like this, that would think that this is backwards, you should just avoid the body, don't touch it. This is not the right attitude. We should do what's scientifically safe. The Muslims are not, ignore the science completely. We go with the science, we go with the research, and the research is, although, yes, I'm not going to say it's safe, because the word safe means 0 risk of infection. We've repeated many, many times. Why are you not allowing children? Why are we saying no over 60? Why no comorbidities? Why are there people with no underlying health issues or immunocompromised patients? We're not allowing them to come close. So we're recognizing the risk and trying to minimize it as well. And that's why we're not doing the full sunnah ghusl. The body then will be dried completely and then ready for the next stage, which is the transfer of the body to the other table for the purpose of coffin, shrouding. Okay, so the next stage, I just want to show that now the body is now dry, just assuming that it's dry, and you've got the used dirty cloth which is there. What you will do is that you will get another towel, okay? So I want you to imagine another towel that you're using, a cloth, for example, and you will take that. This is, again, the Muslim funeral directors will be well used to this. They will know exactly what's going on here, and you will put that over the body like this. At this stage, then, you will then getting ready the bin. You will now pull away the cloth, the dirty cloth, pull it together in this manner, and just goes straight in. Okay? Now, this body is now covered, ready to be transferred. Now, different places would have a different apparatus. One of the best things is a body glide, which is a small kind of type of plastic that has hands that you can hold onto it, and it slides to the body here at an angle, and it allows 2 people very easily just to move the body on and to slide it straight across using the handles. Most places will not have that. So you will need to get your adjoining table or trolley with the coffin on it ready. What will the coffin be like? Here there will be no difference between what you will have in a normal setup. The normal setup will be that you will have your ties flat down first, so a tie of any sort, okay? And you can have as many as you want, but we normally have 3, for example. So you'll have that ready down on the trolley first, and then you'll have your first sheet, and for a male, it should be a minimum of 3. So you'll have your first sheet flat out across the bench, and then you'll have your second one, and then you will have your third one. So, although in this case we actually only have two because we're using the one over there, right? So now this is ready for the body to be transferred across. So if we can show that happening, okay, Atif and Ashraf. Okay, so again, very, very gently hold the head. It has to be the one which is supported most. Get yourself ready and make sure that we just move in one go. And then very gently move across and put the body down. Okay, now, in this situation right now, once we have moved the body across, made ourselves some space, we're going to keep the protective material on, and now is the time that we can apply some perfume. Now the perfuming itself, this is something which is just from the adab, and there is no strict evidence for this, but you would take the perfume itself and you would apply it to the areas of sajda. Again, there's no reason to be unnaturally scared of the body. This is not right. And so therefore you would apply it to the head, which is the primary place of the sajda, and then you would apply it to the hands, and then likewise to the knees, just dabbing it on the knees, and then dabbing it on the feet. This is, as I said, is not strictly proven from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but is the action of the companions and the Muslims. And then you would then perfume the coffin itself, the different layers in a general way. You can just put perfume down in that manner too. And now at this stage, where we'll then do the coffin as per normal. There is no reason that the coffin will not occur as per normal. The first sheet will come and will go over the body from this side, and then you will then do the same with the same sheet on the other side to create that first part. Once you've brought that second sheet over, the second side, of the first sheet over itself, then you can now pull out the one that was covering the aura itself. Okay? That then comes out, and then you will then just ensure that you will then do the process of one sheet and then the next sheet. So then you will do this. And there's flexibility in the ways that you use these sheets and the number of the sheets that you use. And there are some that have a cutout for their head and others that don't. And there's no requirement, there's no obligation whatsoever, neither for the female, nor for the male. There's an idea that you've got to cut it out in a very specific dress way. There is no basis for that to be obligatory. If a person has that ability to do, then that's fine. It's even permissible. And I'm showing this when you have the ability to do this. It's permissible even for the body to be buried in its normal clothes as a shroud. We have Abdullah bin Ubay, for example, who did that using the cloak of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ himself, he had 3 layers of normal clothes. So it's not always required to have a coffin and a shroud in this kind of way, but if you have the ability to do that, then that's something which is good. Once the body has been covered properly and completely and sealed, then you will use then the ties to then seal the body, tie in the normal in the waist clothes. It's a bit more difficult to do with a dummy, but you can, at least you're getting the idea. The point is that nothing needs to change. Now, in some local authorities, they are asking for you to use a body bag. Again, so if you are going to use a body bag, then the body bag itself, you will know that in advance. If you are meant to be using the body bag itself, then the body bag should have been the last layer underneath. The last layer underneath, then it would have meant that after you have pulled up after you've pulled up the coffin, then the last layer would have been then the body bag itself, and then you would then just close the body bag, and that would be it. The body has now been completely sealed, and that is what is required. Again, this is something which is fine with our level of PPE, something which is permissible. The risk, as the documents, and I keep banging on about this because we have to appreciate the balance
between fulfilling the basic rights of the deceased, the Muslims, and then also making sure that we are safe and not, we recognize that we don't have the luxury to do the full ghusl that we want to as per the sunnah. Now, what I want to say is this, in closing of this process. I've done this without the mask, but you have to assume that I'm wearing goggles, that I'm wearing a mask and so on. The volunteers that are going to be required in this process are going to have to accept a whole number of roles. We do need that support. We need support for people just to be doing the washing, for example. We also need people to just be doing the transferring of the body to the coffin. When it goes into the coffin itself, we need people just to be then going back and forth from the cemetery, and they don't actually even come in. We have a team that would go and just be bringing the body from the mortuary. And so at each point, we need people to be ready to be called up and help in this process. So when you see this call for action, this appeal for volunteers, please contact your local masajid or those that have washing facilities that you know. From this moment, you'll start to see numbers of main people who will be acting as hubs that will be telling you where to go, what to do. We need every area of this country to be organized and to be working together, regardless of your background or your madhab or whatever, to ensure that the deceased are given this basic minimum covering. Now, one thing I will say, imagine you have no access to any PPE, and this is not what we call PPE, frankly, okay? The need in the country at this moment in time is for real proper stuff, okay? But let's say that you do not even have access to any kind of apron, or you don't have any volunteers in your area, and there's too much fear, and so on and so forth. Is all of this required? The answer is, if you cannot keep yourself safe, if you are feeling too worried, then it is permissible for you just to do tayammum upon the body. And tayammum upon the body would effectively be, the body would be, would go back to the original position, as you're going to see now in the in this next section. So a couple other scenarios. Let's imagine that you have no access to any washing facilities whatsoever, or you don't have a volunteer team to be able to help you. You're by yourself, or there's a bare minimum number of people. Then the next step after doing a ghusl or leaving our ghusl is tayammum. This is a mistake to think that the next stage would be to wipe over the bag itself. No, the next step would be tayammum, because you don't have access to water or the washing facilities. In the case of tayammum, you would have your gloves on, okay? You would still have your mask on, you'd still have your goggles on, that's fine. The apron itself, if you want to, that's fine, but it's not a requirement. This might even be happening at the mortuary in the hospital. With your gloves, you would strike a surface, whether you have a brick outside, a wall, or the floor outside, all of that is sufficient. You would strike the surface, you would open up the body as we explained before in a minimal way to make sure that the awrah is not uncovered, and then you would strike the surface, bismillah, hit the surface, and then you would wipe the hands first of all of the deceased, right hand first, then left hand, and then you would gently wipe over their face, okay? This is the next step beyond not being able to make ghusl. If the situation was that you're not allowed to open the bag for some reason, and it is possible that some local health authorities in an area or in some countries, they will say you're not allowed to open the bag for legal reasons, then in this case, and only in this case, is it permissible for you to make masah over the bag or do nothing at all. I just want to explain this point a little. Once you've not been allowed to open the bag, it means you're not allowed to do what's obligatory, which is ghusl and tayammum. In principle, there's now nothing left to do. The fact that some scholars and MBC guidelines, we say it as well, is to wipe over the bag is only to do something. Something which is based upon an analogy on what we do when we wipe over our socks. So here would be wet hands, damp hands, and then you would, from the top to the bottom, just wipe over the bag. And that's it. But if you did absolutely nothing, it would make no difference, because by you deciding that you're wiping over the bag, you've actually left the two original rulings that are meant to happen. So if there is some incredible fear, or there are no volunteers, there's no one who knows what's going on, there is a legal directive that you're not allowed to open the bag, then that is something which can be done as a last resort, which is just to wipe over the bag, or frankly, nothing at all, and then it's straight then to be buried. The Salatul Janazah will occur in the graveyard itself. The Imam will stand with the male towards the head of the body. You can put the coffin in front of you where it's meant to be buried. The Imam can stand towards the head, towards the Qibla,
If that's the Qibla, that direction, the Imam would stand here, and then the people would then stand behind, separated physically to maintain physical distancing. Increase the number of rows, 3, 4, 5 rows of 1 or 2 people standing in each row, and the body then will be buried as per normal. With respect to the PPE that's being used by the ambulance drivers and by the people who are burying it, it's only gloves that are required, and a mask is more than enough. There is no extra requirement according to PHE and NHS guidelines. Okay, so then it comes to the actual coffin itself. Now, obviously in this country, the vast majority of local health authorities insist upon using a coffin. This is why it's also very important as part of this appeal to make sure that we take opportunity, lobby our city councils to give us land for Muslim burial grounds, actually dedicated Muslim burial grounds, and not sections in non-Muslim graveyards, so that we don't have to then be held to these in principle impermissible aspects. But of course, because it's the law, then we will use it. So we have a coffin here that you will transfer the body to. Again, maximum no more than 3 or 4 people. So Atif, if you just also lean across, this is how it would happen. Again, 1, 2, and 3. Gently then move the body to the coffin itself. Okay. And then when the coffin is sealed, we do not expect this to be opened again. We do not want to be showing the face to mourners. Mourners, family members will be in self-isolation. We don't want them to be around in the area of the washing. We also don't want the public to be here either. When it comes to the funerals itself, the numbers are being restricted to 5, 10, and maximum 15 with physical distancing involved. This now needs to be disinfected. The people who are involved in the washing are best placed to do it. So 4 parts of water, 1 part bleach, or 100% alcohol. So you will then get your cloth or whatever it is, dunk it in, and make sure that every single part of this coffin is now absolutely clean and disinfected. Okay, this now is ready now for the rest of for the team now to take out and to bury. And for those people, they don't need suits, they don't need aprons, they don't need goggles. All they need is gloves, and that's PHE guidelines. And if they wear a mask, then there's plenty of evidence now to show the excellence of wearing a mask, just to protect yourself and from others from yourselves, and for any other possible risk of infection or any other infection source. They can then take this and they can now take it to the ambulance or the vehicle and take it to the graveyard. This video has been produced to ensure that everything that we're saying is per those guidelines. We're not asking people to take any unnecessary risks. We appreciate that people are worried and scared, but we also want to try and balance that with the right of our deceased. Not one is to be prioritized over the other. There needs to be a balance, and we hope that this video, inshallah, will encourage you to ensure that your deceased and those that you do not know are receiving their rights, that you volunteer and offer yourselves your financial support, but more your physical support, your availability to help these centers, these masajid, those that have the ghusl facilities, and be aware that you can be called up at any time to be just transferring bodies or just wiping down surfaces. This area will need to be now cleaned as well, so everything now needs to be disinfected. That might be your job, and it's a great and noble job in a time of need. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this trial easy upon the Muslims. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from all those that are working for His cause and working for the sake of the Ummah. Jazakumullah khair wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.